Good afternoon, and welcome to our 2024 Veterans Day Convocation. Today is a special day for two reasons. One is that we get to hear our band and choir perform the Armed Service Medley, a tradition and a staple of our Veterans Day program since 2017. Thanks again to Mrs. Mole and the band and choir. Two, we'll get to hear the story of a true American hero, Sergeant John K. Rankel, from someone who knew him best, his father, Kevin Rankel. Before we hear our band and choir perform, I believe it's important to understand how we arrived at this day for the celebration of America's veterans. World War I, known at the time as the Great War, officially ended when the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, in the Palace of Versailles, outside of the town of Versailles in France. However, fighting ceased 7 months earlier when an armistice between the Allied nations and Germany went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And for that reason, November 11th, 1918 is generally regarded as the end of the war to end all wars. In November 1919, President Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day. From that point on, Armistice Day was primarily a day set aside to honor veterans of World War I. But in 1954, after World War II had required the greatest mobilization of soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen in the nation's history, and after American forces had fought aggression in Korea, the 83rd Congress passed legislation making November 11th Veterans Day. Mrs. Mold, take it away.
The United States Army. and recite the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the national anthem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for this afternoon's convocation. Kevin Rankel is the father of Sergeant John K. Rankel. Today, as Mr. Rankel tells John's story, I hope that you take away at least two life lessons. The first lesson I hope you take away is how precious your time at Speedway High School is. In May of 2025, it will be 20 years ago that John walked across the same graduation stage as the class of 2025, and they will do that this spring. John sat in the same classrooms you sit in. John participated in athletics on the same fields and in the same gym some of you do. I want to quickly read some remarks that I made at a basketball awards night John's senior year. Sportsmanship, Senior Service, and Most Improved Awards. These three awards were voted on by the entire team. These three awards will go to a player that demonstrated sportsmanship not only to the opposing team, but also to his own teammates. This player made the most of his opportunities when he was put into the game, and he pushed his teammates daily with his work ethic. His commitment to our basketball program is recognized in the fact that he was not with us last year and earned his way into our program. This hard work, dedication, and self-sacrifice were recognized by his selection as Most Improved Player. Finally, the Service Award goes in part for his dedication to helping others in the community and elementary school students. However, his greatest service will come this summer to our country because he has made a commitment to join the United States Marine Corps. The winner of Sportsmanship, Senior Service, and Most Improved Awards is Senior John Rankel. Little did I know how great John's service to our country would become. Continuing on with how priceless your time in Speedway is, when John would come home on leave, he would speak to my classes. He and I would have breakfast at Charlie Brown's. He sat in my living room in November 2009 before going to Afghanistan, played with my kids, and when he left, gave my wife a hug and me a hearty handshake and a hug. Little did I know that would be the last time I would see him alive. The second lesson I hope you take away is how an event like John's service and ultimate sacrifice can bring people closer together and motivate people to be better. I can certainly say that Mr. Rankel and I are much closer than we were when John was in high school, and I can certainly say that John's mom and I are closer. I can say that my family, especially my sons, have been closer since that day in June 2010. And lastly, I can certainly say that having spent time with the other Marines that served alongside John and hearing their stories of service and dedication to each other and our country, I was inspired and continue to be inspired on a daily basis to be willing to sacrifice for a cause bigger than myself. It is with respect and reverence that I welcome Kevin Rankel, father of Sergeant John K. Rankel.
Thank you, Coach. Good afternoon. I appreciate Coach having me back, as I've given this presentation to your school before. And while most of the audience has never heard this story, some may have. Now I'll ask them to allow me to repeat what I'm about to bestow upon you, because it's the story of a true American hero. At the end of every school year, Speedway High School awards a memorial scholarship to a deserving senior, recognized not only for their efforts on the athletic field, but also for their service to Speedway High School and the community as a whole. Also, when you enter the main gymnasium, you pass by a framed football jersey that's been retired by the high school in memory of a distinguished Speedway alumni. Both the awarding of the memorial scholarship and a retired jersey are in honor of my son and my hero, Marine Sergeant John Kenneth Rankel. I thought it was appropriate, especially on Veterans Day, to introduce you to John, who he was, and what he did. I hope it'll make you appreciate veterans like John a little more. As Coach Bennett said, he was a spark plug, just like you are. He attended Speedway schools through his high school graduation, except for the 2.5 years he came to live with me in the Center Grove area. John had similar likes and dislikes like you all do. Likes included football, girls, music, and getting a car. Dislikes include studying, although he was a pretty good student, keeping his room clean, and listening to his dad, who was never right, at least in his mind. I'm guessing many of those likes and dislikes sound pretty familiar to this group. Now, I'd describe John as a pretty good, not a great, high school athlete. He played football for Coach Pelly during his junior and senior years, and played football, basketball, and baseball during his senior year. I can say, without a doubt, that John was the ultimate team player. And I say this because of the awards that Coach had mentioned just a few minutes earlier that were awarded to John in his senior year. I want to emphasize that Coach had brought out that his hard work and determination, his commitment to the basketball player, or to the program, the fact that he was trying always to make others better, are redeeming qualities that you'll see continued to follow John as he joined the Marine Corps. Our family has discussed between ourselves what spurred John's interest in the military, because our family is not a military family. Hardly anyone on either side of his family had previously served. I thought originally that the September 11th attacks on New York and Washington, which happened during John's freshman year, made him decide to join. His stepfather believes it was John's burning desire to be part of something bigger than himself, to join the ultimate team. Whatever the influence, I remember finding him surfing the Marine Corps website a year or so after 9/11 and telling him that with his skill set, he should go to college and join the military as an officer. He didn't feel the same. If he was going to join, he wanted to join as an enlisted man and be on the front line. Now, these discussions continued through the end of his sophomore year when he decided to return to Speedway and live with his mother. Now, I was devastated by that decision, and it took me a long time, frankly, to forgive him. But I did. And once I did, I started focusing on my efforts at landing him a football scholarship. Ball State and Franklin College, for example, were two schools that had expressed an interest in him. But what I didn't realize at the time was that he was pursuing his interest in the Marine Corps, and he told me this over breakfast in September of his senior year. He agreed to hold off signing commitment papers until he had visited a few more schools that fall. But despite those visits, I knew his heart wasn't in it. His mind was made up to join the Marines, and he signed those commitment papers on December 27, 2004, to join the Marines after high school graduation. John's career with the Marines officially began on August 5, 2005, just a few days after his 19th birthday. According to his fellow Marines, he was a natural. He was a Marines Marine from the onset. He graduated from basic training with honors, then went on to the School of Infantry, where he again graduated with honors. He was promoted to corporal earlier than his peers and prepared for his first deployment to Iraq in 2007. Now, thankfully, his 2 tours in Iraq were pretty uneventful. Since his death, I've met some of the Marines he deployed with to Iraq, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard about what a great Marine he was, how he wanted to get better at what he did, and how he motivated others to do the same, which was exactly what Coach Bennett had recognized a few years back in Speedway. And oh yes, his fellow Marines also have commented about his infectious and sometimes goofy smile, which you see on these pictures here. Toward the end of his second Iraqi deployment, John had expressed an interest in perhaps leaving the Marine Corps and going to college. So we jumped right in and applied to, and John was accepted by IU, Franklin College, and IUPUI. A week after we returned to the States, however, he called me to tell me that he had in fact decided to stay in the Marine Corps because his unit's next mission would involve deploying to Afghanistan. My response was, wait a minute, John. You've done your part with 2 deployments to Iraq. Why would you need to deploy a 3rd time? His response was, Pops, it's the right thing to do. And I didn't have an answer for that. Just to give you an idea of how badly he wanted to get to Afghanistan and join the fight, his original unit's mission had changed shortly after John was re-enlisted and was promoted to sergeant. Now, instead of deploying to Afghanistan, he was going to tour the Orient on a Navy ship. John was having none of that. He actively sought to join another unit that was going to Afghanistan, and his transfer was accepted in late 2009. Now, he still had to win the respect of the unit he was transferring to, since they'd been training for a few months for their mission. Why would they accept a readily green, recently promoted sergeant after all? But John set out to win their respect and did so through hard work and determination, winning several commendations from his new commanding officers. Now, I've gone on for a few minutes about how great a Marine I think he was, but I can give you no greater example than the day he died, June 7, 2010. John was out on patrol, leading 2 squads of 6 men each, when the squad he wasn't a part of came under heavy gunfire and was pinned down behind a haystack. John ran approximately 600 yards with approximately 80 pounds of gear on his back to join this squad and started returning fire. He was beginning to organize a direct assault on the enemy when his superiors radioed the artillery support was being readied, and before the artillery could begin its assault, John and his Marines would have to fall back. Now, this is where it gets hard for me, because my son acted in a way I can't begin to fathom. He ordered each of his 6 Marines to fall back while he stayed behind that haystack and provided covering fire. When they'd all fallen back safely, he got up to fall back himself and was shot. The firefight continued and prevented his fellow Marines from evacuating him to safety. We're told he fought for his life for over an hour before he succumbed from his wounds. Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't airsoft. This wasn't a Call of Duty video game or even paintball. This was the real thing. And I ask each of you in this auditorium this afternoon, could you have done what John did? My personal answer is no, I couldn't. I would have fallen back before my 6 buddies, or even worse, would have been frozen in fear, unable to move behind that haystack. But my son, my hero, did not. This 23-year-old man who grew up in Speedway just like you made the ultimate sacrifice 14 years ago this past June. For his actions that day, he was awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star with a Valor device to recognize his heroism. John is buried in the Field of Valor at Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis, and I'd encourage everyone to visit Crown Hill and just take in the history that exists there. I would also encourage everyone to visit the Indiana War Memorial in downtown Indianapolis. It's such a treasure. John's mother was instrumental in creating an exhibit in the War Memorial's museum that tells John's story. And one of the pictures in the slideshow is of then Governor Mitch Daniels reviewing John's exhibit just a few years ago. Lastly, I need to tell you another story about what John's fellow Marines did to honor him while they were still deployed in Afghanistan. Toward the end of this slideshow is a picture of several military trucks parked inside a compound. The size of this compound is tough to visualize in the picture, but we're told it's triangle-shaped, measuring 230 yards. That's over 2 football fields on each side. This compound was named Command Outpost Rankel, which served as an operating base for Marines until it was turned over to the Afghans in 2013. John's commanding officer wrote the following about the outpost. Its purpose and personality match the name it was named for. Its size is bigger than all other outposts and indeed far bigger than what was needed for the company. But John Rankel was a big man. Its location is pushed up right against the bazaar, which was once a powerful enemy stronghold, because John Rankel feared no one. John Rankel ran to the fight and didn't back down. For several months after John died, I'd walk to the mailbox every morning and find myself looking up at our U.S. flag waving in the breeze and wondering, why did all this happen? But as the years have passed, I've gained comfort by coming to the realization that John died loving what he was doing, which was leading men and set an example about how to live and how to die. And so while I miss my son every single day, I'm so very proud of what people thought of him while he was on this earth and the actions he took when he was called upon to act. Through all this, I've gained a new appreciation for veterans and for the nation they fought for. So I want to personally extend my appreciation to all the veterans, and I encourage each of you to do the same when you encounter a veteran. Not only today, but every day. Thank you for your time this afternoon. God bless John Rankel, the veterans everywhere in this great nation, and may God bless America. Thank you.
As we conclude today, I would like to thank again our band and choir and Mrs. Mole for a wonderful performance. Let's give them another round of applause. I'd also like to thank Bill P., who's here from the Speedway Cable TV, who came to record this today and put it out there on their YouTube channel at some point. So, Bill, thank you very much for that. On your way out today, in the back right of the auditorium, back left, are 4 veterans from Westside Garden Plaza who've come today to view our show, so I think we need a big round of applause for those 4 people. A big thanks to Mr. Rankel again for coming out and speaking, sharing John's story. And thanks to the students and staff at Speedway High School, you have displayed respect, honor, and gratitude for those that we have recognized today. I hope today has demonstrated to you the importance of taking time to recognize those that have served and are currently serving in our armed forces. My hope is that you look around and talk to veterans to learn their story. Another hope I have is an act that my dad does often. While my dad is a Navy veteran himself, when he's out in public and notices a veteran, he simply approaches them and thanks them for their service. You can do the same. It doesn't have to be anything eloquent, and you don't have to make a 5-minute speech. Just simply say, thanks for your service. And that concludes today's program. Thank you.